Ooh. Welcome to the Fade 5 College Football Edition. Ben Wittenstein with you. Nate Jacobson over next to me. Nate, we're heading into week 9 of college football. We've had our ups, we've had our downs, but this kind of week is somewhat of a dead week in terms of matchups after like 2 really exciting weeks of college football. But I think we have some pretty good spots that we found for this weekend.
Yeah, I wouldn't say a lot of like big matchups that are going to determine like who's maybe up ahead into like the national championship race. But as we get later into the year, including this year, I feel like there's a lot of games where just with a 12-team playoff, the implications are higher. You know, there's still teams that believe they can still make the 12-team playoff or find a way into their conference championship and maybe get an automatic berth. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of games that end up mattering, but it's kind of hard to figure out which games will actually matter. And you might be looking back in a few weeks and being like, oh, that was a big result there for that team to get back in the playoff race. So yeah, it's always fun. And, you know, sometimes the weeks where we're not really having high expectations for the quality of games end up being really good, like a few weeks ago.
There we go.
Everyone went apple picking on Saturday, and then it turned out to be one of the best weeks of the season.
Yeah, this isn't your apple picking week. I mean, Halloween's about a week and a half away, so you better get all your apple picking out of the way.
Yeah, where we are, it's too warm.
Yeah, and honestly, it doesn't feel like it's even fall.
You can't put a flannel on in 60 degrees and go out in some orchard. You're going to not be comfortable.
That's true. So stay inside, turn up the air conditioning, watch a very fun college football slate because you don't want to be out of the house for some of these games that could be upsets. We have some fun matchups, have some good primetime games as well, Nate. But we will start, as we always do, on the Fade 5 College Edition with the Plus Bus. As we get on the bus, hop on plus 100 odds or greater. Any game this week, Nate, plus money. And I'll start this one off with a bet on the Michigan State Spartans. The money line, plus 158 as they play the Michigan Wolverines. And honestly, this bet, Nate, to me is, again, I'm fading this bet more than I'm riding with Michigan State. So I'm fading Michigan. And to me, this is a team where, and you've mentioned this a lot on the show, in group chats, whatever it is, but if this team did not have the Michigan name next to it, people would think so much lower of the way this team is. They've had quarterback issues. Their defense isn't what it used to be the last couple of seasons. Offensively, they've just been dead in the water. They don't have that coaching advantage that we saw them have with Jim Harbaugh. So like everything about this team is just significantly worse, especially after a year where they won the national championship. So to me, this is fading them. We heard midweek that they weren't even sure who was going to be the starting quarterback for a game like this. And as someone who's come from the Indiana University football program of the past where they were struggling to figure out who their starting quarterback was, it's not a good sign for a team to not say or not know who the starting quarterback is going to be. So that's like point number one for them, is like they don't know who's going to be under center, which is a huge issue to me, knowing that this offense is still struggling. We saw them struggle against Illinois. Defensively, they had some moments, but they really couldn't stop them. So to me, this is a Michigan State team coming off a big win against Iowa. They had their bye. Maybe they're a different team after their bye that we saw against Iowa. Maybe heading into the next week, they can catch Michigan off guard. It's a rivalry game. Catch them on their heels, and Michigan State wins this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird game because last week, Michigan closed -6 at Illinois, and now they're only laying like 4.5 against Michigan State, who last week closed almost 7 at home to was it Iowa? That's right. I mean, so yeah. I mean, from you're kind of selling. I think you might be buying Michigan State at the top and selling Michigan maybe at the bottom, but maybe Michigan, we haven't even found the bottom yet because things have been so bad in Ann Arbor, and it doesn't seem like maybe Sharon Moore is their coach for the future, but that's a conversation for another time. So yeah, I can't talk can't talk you out of that because Jonathan Smith and Michigan State, the coach of Michigan State, Jonathan Smith, one of the more respected coaches in the sport. And it looks like the Spartans made a home run hire there. I thought when they hired him, that was a home run hire. I thought it maybe would take a year for him to, figure some stuff out just because they don't have too much talent and a young quarterback in Aiden Childs. But they made a really big statement when off the bye against Iowa that they could be maybe a middle tier Big Ten team going forward in this new conference.
All right, let's go to your plus bus of the weekend, Nate. This one's interesting. Who do you like?
Yeah, I know you're not going to like this, and it kind of goes against what you're going to have a little later in the show, but I'm going to be on the Washington money line. I mean, part of this is I don't like too many underdogs this week, and this is one I bet early. I saw the news that Curtis Rourke had a finger injury on Sunday morning, and he was likely going to miss on Saturday, this week's game. quarterback, of course, for IU, who led them to a big win over Nebraska until he got hurt. And then Taven Jackson, the backup quarterback, came in. I just think that a few things here. I think Washington is a little bit better than their record. I know they have 3 losses, but one was a really fluky loss to Rutgers where everything went wrong. And then they lost to Iowa, but that was after they beat Michigan, and it was a tough travel spot. Early game 2, so it was 9 a.m. on their body clock. So I'm going to throw that result off the window. Feel like you want to bet, kind of like with Michigan State and Jonathan Smith after his first bye week as the head coach of the program. I think Jedd Fisch really needed that bye week last week. They played 7 straight games. I feel like with such a new roster, new coaching staff, that the bye week is going to do wonders for Washington. They're going to be a bet on team in the second half of the season. And I think this is a perfect spot to maybe fade Indiana, backup quarterback, off a huge win. So maybe they're just a little bit inflated because I still have questions about who they played. I don't want to take anything away from what they did against Nebraska because that was extremely impressive. And if it's Curtis Work starting, I might not want to step in front of the Hoosiers train. But now with Taven Jackson and a Washington defense led by Bill Belichick's son, Steve,
yeah,
like he could maybe draw some stuff up to confuse the inexperienced quarterback who was the backup. So Washington money line. Kind of don't want this to win in a sense because I do have Washington under regular season win total 7.5. But out of all the underdogs on the board, Washington makes the most sense. I feel like this could be kind of a high variance game where would not be surprised if Washington won outright, but also maybe just the Indiana train keeps rolling. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It's Kurt Cignetti and his offense just going to take down anyone that gets in their way.
Yeah, Nate, let me just go right into it for number 5 then.
Number 5.
Because let me give you the reason why maybe your Washington under bet is safe. And I'm going to take the Indiana Hoosiers -6.5 on Saturday. I wrote about this for the Gaming Juice if you want to go and read it for free on thegamingjuice.com. But Nate, Indiana's a wagon. It really is. At this point, IU is just a wagon, and I know they're going to be playing backup Taven Jackson, but I think this is a better quarterback than what I think people may expect from a backup. He had an okay season last year. He had his ups and downs. I think he was looking over his shoulder a little bit because, again, it was an Indiana team that wasn't really sure who their starting quarterback was going to be, and he kind of felt the quarterback competition a little bit. Now he's the backup. He knows he's the backup behind Rourke, but he played really well when he was called upon last week against Nebraska. And I think that's kind of a thing that we've seen with head coach Kurt Cignetti. I think we've seen him be able to get his guys ready no matter where they are on the depth chart, no matter who they're playing. He is just really good at preparing his guys. And I think Taven Jackson is going to be able to do that. He had a couple touchdown passes last week. He came in 7 for 8, 91 yards. He had a pretty good game coming in for an injured Rourke. And that's something that I think we need to take into account. I'll take Indiana under the 7. Well, if it gets to 7.5, I'm going to back off, but I like them at 6.5 here. And I think another thing that we saw Washington, even before their bye, they struggled defending the run. They gave up 220 yards to Iowa. And I think Indiana, don't sell their run game short. This is a good running team. It's a good running offense. They're a top 20 team running the ball. So I think running the ball wise, they may be able to run over the Huskies. I think defensively, they'll be able to stop some of their plays. I'm worried about the Huskies being able to score points. They've scored in the 20s. To early to low 20s against Big Ten teams. This is an Indiana team. You've got game day coming into town. You got another sold out game. Kurt Cignetti's coaching really, really well. Got his guys prepared. I'm going to get on the wagon. I'm going to get on the train, Nate. I'm going to bet and lay the points with the Indiana Hoosiers.
So you're saying there's a pretty good well, never mind. I was going to make some sort of joke how Indiana's going to win by 1 to 6 points and we both lose.
Yeah. Honestly, I could see that happening. The thing is, Indiana has just been so good and they've been able to score so well. It's tough to bet against that.
Yeah, and on Sunday morning, the line was like Indiana -9.5, maybe with some anticipation that Rourke might not be good to go. Then I went to 8.5, and that's when I bet 8.5 when I saw the tweets about Rourke, and it quickly got to 7.5. And then when more sports books started posting numbers that were lower than 7, then we've kind of hit a consensus where it's been 6.5 since Monday. So I feel like that line is going to kind of stay there where if it ever got to 7, there'd be some Washington backers, but kind of like the game against Nebraska where it stayed pretty much 6.5. Anytime we got to 7, people are betting Nebraska like I ended up doing. But it, turned out they covered every number, even all the alts. for
It's
Indiana
time
last week.
it's time to start having that conversation with your kids about Indiana being possibly 8-0 as we head into November, Nate.
It's a dangerous conversation.
It is a very
It's a
dangerous
scary
conversation.
talk to have with your kids.
Get them prepared. Get them ready. Let's go to number 4 for Nate.
Number 4.
So yeah, this is my favorite bet of the week so far. UCF on the money line, and we're playing a ranked BYU team, and UCF is the favorite. So I'm not going to put too much stock into that and to the top 25 rankings. Simply put, BYU's overachieved this year, and UCF's underachieved. And if you kind of go back into some of BYU's results in Big 12 play, they're 4-0. 3 of the wins are at home in Provo, and that's a very good home field advantage. 2 of the games are at night. It's always like a tough spot to play, a tricky trip, especially for like a program like Kansas State, who they took down earlier this year, who's not familiar with going to Provo at night. In that game against Kansas State, they go on a 31-0 run in like 7 minutes. They included a scoop and score and a punt return. Then they play Baylor the next week, so that's their road game in the Big 12 that they won so far in Waco. They get out to a hot start, and they held on even though Baylor outgained them. Their next Big 12 game, they played Arizona. This game was in Provo. Kind of an equal game statistically, but BYU had a 4-1 turnover edge. So a lot of turnover luck for BYU there. And then last week on a Friday night, Oklahoma State comes into town, and Oklahoma State pretty much has nothing to play for in terms of all their goals that they were trying to achieve this year are pretty much done in terms of going over their win total, going to the Big 12 title game again. And Oklahoma State played very well. They ran the ball all over BYU. With 10 seconds left, BYU throws a 35-yard touchdown where the Oklahoma State secondary just had a really poor job tackling, and BYU gets away with another one. So now BYU sits at 7-0. They're getting a lot of national buzz. I really don't think this BYU team is that good, and Oklahoma State kind of exploited them last week with their run game, and I think that's a real tough matchup when you have Gus Malzahn and his offense, who is always run first. They made a quarterback change a few weeks ago in Ja'Cory Brown, who is a run-first guy. They have a couple good running backs, Harvey and Boone. So I like UCF here, the matchup of their run game against a BYU run defense that got gashed by Oklahoma State, their quarterback, and also Ollie Gordon. And then last week, UCF, they fall just a little bit short against Iowa State, but I feel like that performance kind of showed that they haven't quit on the season. I know it was a tough way to lose, but coming back home to Orlando, having BYU travel all the way across the country to Orlando, they're not going to be in the friendly confines of Provo, Utah. So I feel like UCF could exploit some of BYU's weaknesses, and I don't think BYU is a good enough team to exploit some of the weaknesses that UCF has. So give me the unranked favorite over the ranked dog on Saturday in Orlando.
Yeah, that usually works out really well in that situation. That was honestly because I was looking to bet this game when I saw you talking about it. The situation makes a lot of sense, and I've been looking to fade BYU for quite a bit now and just haven't found that right spot. But this does make a lot of sense, and I think when you talked about it a little, BYU's just been they've been in games, they've been winning games, but it hasn't been like the most convincing of all time.
Yeah, and before the season, BYU's win total was 4.5. So full credit to what they're doing. But it's all about buying low, selling high, taking a team at their peak or betting against a team at their peak height against a UCF team that this season has not gone as planned. They're on a 4-game losing streak, lost some bad games to Colorado, to Florida. So yeah, I do think that UCF definitely is the right side here if you want to just be with where the sharps are.
I love it. All right, let's go to number 3 of the weekend.
Number 3.
Nate, we're going to go to a Midwestern match up that was, as you mentioned before we started recording last week, this was at Wrigley Field. This week it's going to be at Iowa, and we are going to take the over in Northwestern Iowa, 38 points. Nate, this is a low total, and when you think of Iowa and Northwestern, immediately you think low total, you think defense, you think hard-nosed, 3 yards and a cloud of dust type of football. But let me tell you, Nate, this is not your slightly older brothers Iowa versus Northwestern game, because I think we're going to see some points. I think we're going to see 2 teams that can actually, at least on Iowa's side, can score the football more than I think people expect. I think we're getting a little bit of value here because people just see Iowa Northwestern, they think low scoring. And to be honest, Iowa could possibly get 35 to 40 points on their own against this Northwestern team. Northwestern just isn't good. Their defense is nowhere near where people expect it to be or possibly think it is. Their rushing defense is 68th in terms of opponent success rate. They're less than average in the United States in college football right now. So I think Iowa's going to run all over them. I think we're going to see a similar case where Iowa just destroys that Northwestern defensive line like they did against Washington. I think we maybe see a 200-plus yard game on the ground for Iowa, and they're probably going to score quite a few touchdowns on the ground as well. Iowa can score 40 on them, 31 at Minnesota, 40 against Washington. They averaged 32 points per game at home this season. I really like the under 38. I take it all the way up to maybe like 40 and a half, 41 if it gets to that point. And then I would start thinking about maybe not hitting the over. But I do think Iowa is poised to hit an over like this. They're 6-1 to the over this season. They're 6-0 to the over at home. And also their defense, by the way, again, not your older brother's Iowa defense. They're 88th in opponent success rate. They're 47th in points per game allowed. This isn't the hard-nosed, tough Iowa defense that we're used to of the last couple years. They're still a good defense, but it's nothing glass shattering, nothing world breaking. So I'm going to go with the over 38.
Yeah, Michigan. I actually watched a good amount of the Iowa Michigan State game, and I thought Michigan State played pretty well offensively and exploited an Iowa defense that we've been just so used to being so dominant throughout the year. So last year, the game was 10-7 at Wrigley Field. I'm trying to find the total quickly.
It was probably in the low 30s, right? I remember that game being like 30.
Yeah, 31, 32, 31 and a half. I miss the days when Iowa totals were in the low 30s. And then I think even in November, they were in the high 20s, and they all seemed to go under. Those were good days.
I think this game has a good chance to go over. People, I don't know if the market has caught up with Iowa overs. Even Northwestern overs have been hitting at more of a rate than they usually have. I mean, I thought the Indiana Northwestern game was going to go under, and Indiana just exploded for like 40 plus points against them. So I don't think the Northwestern defense is going to be able to handle Iowa. Northwestern maybe scores 10 points in this one. That might honestly be all we need if Iowa can get to 28, 29 points.
Yep. I'm not going to personally bet it, but I'll root for you.
I wish I could legally bet it in this state, but unfortunately I can't. So maybe we'll have to see. Let's go to number 2, Nate. This is for
Number
you.
2.
Yeah, we're going to another total, but this time under in the SEC, and it's going to be Texas A&M hosting LSU, and I like the under 54 in this game. So LSU's defense has actually been pretty good. I think since the bye week, they've kind of figured some stuff out. Not too surprised, Blake Baker's a defensive coordinator who was Missouri's defensive coordinator the last few years. And LSU went out, broke the bank, made him the highest paid assistant coach in the country, or at least the highest paid assistant coach at the time when they took him, plucked him from Missouri. Baker's a Louisiana native, so that was kind of his dream job. So not surprised to see him at least starting to do well with an LSU defense that, like, talent-wise, maybe not as good as some LSU defense in the past, or definitely not as good, but definitely a better unit than last year's team that really struggled. And if it wasn't for that defense, Jaden Daniels probably would have maybe won some bigger things other than just the Heisman Trophy. But since the bye week, they gave up 23 points in regulation. Ole Miss, 26 total. Gave up 10 points to Arkansas, much to our chagrin, because we had Arkansas in multiple ways last week in the podcast. But definitely we've seen improvement from the Tigers defense. We also have seen Connor Wegman, others in the game against Missouri, really struggle. The opener against Notre Dame, really bad. Last week, they play Mississippi State, which is the worst defense in the SEC by far. And he throws 2 interceptions, just wasn't very steady in that game. So a player who I don't know if I completely trust, despite having that really good game against Mizzou in the beginning of October. And on the other side of the ball, interesting matchup here because you have Brian Kelly and his kind of offensive-minded coaching history against a defensive-minded coach and Mike Elko. Yeah. And the history between these two is interesting because Mike Elko was the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame when Kelly was there in 2017. And then he left, took a lot more money to go to A&M, become the defensive coordinator for Jimbo there, and then eventually went to Duke, did wonders at Duke. And then when Jimbo gets fired, they pick Elko back up. He goes back to College Station. But he does have some history with Kelly. And whenever there's 2 guys who used to coach in the same staff, I always kind of lean towards the defensive side in that matchup because of the familiarity, especially a guy like Elko who, I mean, he just could take any talent and get them to play up to their ability and get the most of them. And luckily for him at A&M, they kind of had really good recruiting, especially on the defensive line. So I feel like A&M's defensive line is one of the few defensive lines in the country that could challenge a very good LSU offensive line and Garrett Nussmeier. So kind of like both defenses here, more than both offenses, and that kind of lends into the under 54. I also like the fact that both these teams, funny enough, are the only two teams in the SEC that don't have a loss in conference play yet. And that could go a real long way, the winner of this game, to have a spot in the 12-team playoff, whether you make the SEC title game or maybe you go like 10-2, because both teams lost in non-conference in week 1. But maybe because of tiebreakers, you're like the third best team in the SEC, but then you have a good chance to be like the 7 to 10 seed in the playoff. I'm not sure how everything's gonna work out. Anyway, whenever there's like a game like that where it's kind of like not must win, but like a real important game, really high stakes game,
A lot on the line.
I feel like, we're going to see some maybe conservative play calling or decision making, because you don't want to make the mistake. You don't want to have a 4th and 1 inside, from like midfield go awry. You'll just like punt the ball and try to like trust your defense. I feel like LSU at this point can maybe trust their defense because Baker has done such a good job with that unit. So a lot of things here leading to the under, but I do like kind of like the idea that this could be kind of a more conservative, kind of feel it out game. And I have some real concerns about Wegman. And then I also like Elko to get the best of Kelly when it comes to X's and O's.
Yeah, 100%. I don't believe in that Texas A&M offense to be in any way, shape, or form consistent. And then I think we've seen LSU play really well the past couple of weeks, but now they're playing a team that knows how to play really good defense sometimes. So I think the under, to me, if you're betting anything in this game, that has to be one of the top plays you're looking at.
Yeah, it's hard to come up. I mean, I know a lot of people want to know who the winner is or who we like against the spread. A&M's a 2.5 point favorite. It got bet down from like 3.5, 3 to 2.5.
Yeah,
I understand that. I feel like 3 might be the right number. Like, do you have any opinion on who's going to win this game? Because I'm pretty torn kind of when I break this game down, and that's why I lead to an angle where there's going to be maybe a little bit of a struggle for points than what you'd expect from a normal game involving LSU.
Yeah, I'm 100% the same way for a game like this where it's like LSU's been really good, and I think they've been better than people expected over the last couple of games. But in a situation like that, when the spread is so low, you're like, this is something's going on here. I don't know if I could trust A&M at this number, but I don't know if I really want to bet on LSU that's like been playing really well at this number too. It's a little stinky, a little fishy.
Yeah.
So the under to me in a big game like this where there's so much on the line and we know how inconsistent a lot of both these teams' offenses can be, I would definitely take the under in a game.
Yeah, I feel like
sure.
LSU's slightly better of a team, but you just play Ole Miss, you just play Arkansas on the road, you go back on the road. Not maybe an ideal situational spot for LSU, who had a kind of a ideal situational spot a few weeks ago when they hosted Ole Miss.
No, definitely not. All right, Nate, it is time for our number 1 pick. And sometimes we're against each other. Sometimes we have different picks in the same game. But this time, it's all love. It's all, instead of butting heads, we're coming together. We're having a, there we go. We're doing a great pick. All right, number 1.
Number 1.
We are going with the Mizzou, Alabama game. Nate, I will let you introduce, because we talked about this play a couple days ago even, like right at the start of the week. We really both like this play. Tell the people what we like.
Yeah, so this came down to me just thinking Mizzou is going to struggle to score points here. And the big reason why is Brady Cook and the injury he suffered against Auburn, the ankle injury early in the game against Auburn, went to the hospital, got an MRI, decided to come back because he's just a total gamer and he's kind of a true son of Missouri from St. Louis, like his dream college like landing spot was to be the quarterback of the Missouri Tigers one day. And he's having a little bit of success there, so he doesn't want his career to end. And he mentioned he only has a few games in Columbia for O'Field, so he wasn't going to miss the second half of the game against Auburn. Leads the team to a big comeback. But now I have to wonder kind of like the health, repercussions of coming back. And just regardless of just he suffered an ankle injury. Now you travel to Alabama for a tough game against a real desperate Alabama team. I'm not sure how healthy his Cook's going to be. I would imagine he does play in this game, just knowing kind of his mentality. But Last year, we saw him against Kansas State injure his shoulder. He came back the next week against Memphis despite having there were some reports saying he wasn't going to, potentially not going to play because he wasn't practicing. I think at this point in his career, he doesn't really need a practice to play. He's going to play, and I think because he's going to play, this is going to keep the total kind of around this 55 range, and I do like the under here. I know there's some concerns about Alabama's defense in general and how they played against Georgia, how they played against Vanderbilt, but last week they held Tennessee off the scoreboard for the first 30 minutes, so maybe that's a defense that's kind of coming into its own, and I just don't know I know Mizzou has good receivers on paper. And, if you just kind of think about how Alabama struggled against Georgia like a month ago, maybe Mizzou's quarterbacks or wide receiver, could do well. Luther Burden being, a future first round pick in the NFL this upcoming spring. But if Cook's hobbled, and then on the other side, Alabama's offense seems a little bit out of sorts, and Mizzou's defense, despite having a really bad showing at A&M a few weeks ago, did play well against Auburn. I know they haven't been truly tested other than the 8M game, and they didn't pass that test. But also on the other side, I have worries about Jalen Milroe and Alabama's defense because they just did not seem in sync last week. So kind of betting against two offenses, two quarterbacks, a little struggling a little bit, especially Brady Cook, who's probably going to be less than 100% for this game. And his ability to maybe run or quarterback scramble would be much needed in this game. And I don't think that's going to be he'll be able to physically do that.
Yeah, I think I can make the case too. Both these teams' defenses are good. They honestly are good. And I know you talked about the worries for Bama, but the numbers, they back up a pretty good Bama defense, especially if we're thinking Mizzou's going to be running the ball because of Cook's injury. I mean, Alabama's run defense is really good. They're top 20 in opponent early down EPA. They're a top 15, I believe, in rushing defense in some of these numbers. And Mizzou also struggles on early downs. So you have a defense in Alabama that's good on early downs. Mizzou's offense struggles in early downs. And then Mizzou on the flip side, Mizzou's defense is really good. They're 35th in defensive success rate. They're 7th in defensive success rate, 35th in opponent points per play. So you just look at the base numbers, the data behind this as well. And these are two teams that have pretty solid defenses going up against each other. I don't trust Alabama's offensive consistency, and I don't trust Mizzou's offense with a less than 100% quarterback. So to us, I mean, it seemed obvious that a game like this would go under, and hopefully the line moves in our direction in the next couple of days, and maybe people overseas start betting on Friday. We see that go down to 54, 53.5, but for now, 55.5, I really do like.
Yeah, and then in terms of Mizzou in the rushing game, Nate Noel, their leading rusher, is expected to miss the game. Maybe that's not the best thing for an under because then Mizzou will just focus on throwing the ball, but I just don't think they're going to have much success throwing the ball. And then Alabama can drop more in coverage to kind of protect that if Mizzou doesn't have too much threat of a running game.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Nate. Before we do bonus time, don't forget you can rate and review us. You can go on Twitter, X. You can follow us. Our handles are right there or right there. You can also go to thegamingjuice.com. But Nate, bonus time. We have our bonus bets for this weekend. We get the Jazz hands up. I can start us off. This is one of the bets that I have already made. It's Texas Tech and their team total over 29.5 at minus 115. If you're going to give me a Texas Tech team total under 30, Nate, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it instinctually because I don't know if Texas Tech beats TCU. They're 6.5 point underdogs on the road. They did not have a very good game last week as well. But offensively, I think they are solid. Defensively, they're not very good. I'm not going to rely on their defense too much. In fact, I hope their defense does give up a lot of points in a short amount of time. So we see Texas Tech with plenty of possessions to get us over 29.5. But Texas Tech, first of all, they average 36 points per game. In their last 3 games, it's averaging 35 points per game. They're 29th in points per play. They've gotten 30-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. So to me, this is a team that scores because they have to, because their defense is so bad. And by the way, Nate, the total in this game is 67.5, 68. There's going to be a lot of points. TCU is going to score a lot, which means Texas Tech is going to have to use their only really plus on the team, which is their offense, to try to stay in this game. So I think we see plenty of points for Texas Tech against TCU's bad defense. They're not very good. They're bad at getting off the field, 68th in defensive 3rd and 4th down success rate. I think Texas Tech does really well on those 3rd and 4th down conversion attempts. So over 29.5, if you can get me 30, which Texas Tech has been very good historically this season at getting 30 plus, I love this bet a lot. I really do.
So my bonus time, I know you gave a lot of good numbers there. There's going to be no numbers here. It's going to be Minnesota -4, situational play. Fade Maryland off the storm the field win the other day, last week against USC, where USC just kind of threw the game away. USC probably should have won that game by double digits. And Maryland, who the week before lost to Northwestern, I'm not going to put too much stock into that win. They have a nice quarterback in Edwards, but a lot of flaws on that team. Meanwhile, you have Minnesota team coming off the bye. I don't always love laying points with PJ Fleck in the favorite role. So I haven't bet this personally. I'm going to see if this comes down a little bit, 3.5, hopefully 3. 3 would be a big bet for me on the Golden Gophers, but still I think 4 is a playable number. But if you want to wait it out like I am, I'd suggest waiting it out. But fade Maryland off the storm the field win in a big upset over USC, and now they're hitting the road to Minnesota, who should be fresh and off the bye and have kind of showed some improvement the last few weeks. They beat UCLA in a real tough spot for them. They beat the USC team that I was just talking about. They held their own against Michigan after falling behind. Played a very good first half against Iowa before losing. So I think the Minnesota, I'm kind of going in backwards order for the Golden Gophers, but they have been getting better, especially those last 2 wins against USC and then UCLA, where they traveled out to Pasadena off a storm the field win of their own against USC and kind of passed that test. So I think Minnesota has a good chance to win this game by 7 or more.
Yeah, I think I'm going to tell you on this. If it goes down to 3, absolutely, I'm going to tell you. Hopefully, maybe we get some late bets in there on Maryland, but at 4, I'll gladly take that as well. I think that's a fine enough number. Minnesota off the bye, love it. Maryland still reeling after a big win, and they're loving it, and they have to go to Minnesota. Like, the situation works perfectly for this type of a game. It's great. Nate, if you don't have anything else, I think that's it. You can see our bets all are scrolling across the bottom of the screen here.
Good luck this week, and we're excited to talk about I'm sure one of us next week will have a bet in the game between Ohio State and Penn State. So looking forward to another big game next week in terms of what should be 2 top 5 teams if they take care of business this upcoming week.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're already talking about week 10 on this podcast. It's great. For Nate Jacobson, I'm Ben Wittenstein. Don't forget, free account at thegamingjuice.com. You can read all of our bets. I got some NBA bets as well coming up through the pipeline, so that'll be fun. But for now, good luck, everyone, and we will see y'all next week.